Hello and welcome to Jessie James Beads here on Facebook. I hope no matter what it is you're doing today, you've had a beautiful day so far and continue to do so. I'm Jem Hawkes, I'm based in the United Kingdom, slap bang in the middle of England. And today we're feeling autumn. We're just passing the equinox and it's certainly getting a little bit more autumnal here. I hope all things are treating you beautifully wherever you are in the world. So let's just say hello and good evening from the UK. It's just about 9 PM where I am. And I'm starting to get a slightly better idea of the time zones around the world. Not great still. So if I say good evening, many apologies. It's my absolute pleasure to be with you today, tonight, this afternoon, whichever way you want to think about it. And today I'm going to be looking at the MMB for September 2021, which is Morticia's Garden. And I've just got a little sneaky peek down on the board of all the different bits and bobs that you will get in the box, and it's such a beautiful box. I can't tell you how excited I was to receive this. I opened it up and I was squealing. Very, 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 very beautiful pieces indeed. Now, you'll have to see when I bring the beads into view what you actually get in each of those selections. But honestly, they are stunning, and the Spells and Hexes strand is probably one of my favourite strands I've ever seen. And I keep saying that, I keep coming back to that comment, because every time there's a new delivery, I'm just like a kiddie in a sweetie shop. I'm so excited, so stoked to see what is going to be in front of me this time. So I hope you've had a beautiful day. Anne is in from sunny California. Love the crown. Any chance you'll be able to do a tutorial on the crown? There is one. I'll pop a link in after tonight's live or today's live. I can pop you a link to the Chaos crown and you can go and have a gander and see if it's for you. I was trying to find something a little bit Morticia-y to wear. So I found the lippy and I found a top. And then I realised that the piece of jewellery that I wanted to wear is stuck away in storage. So unfortunately, this was the closest I could get. I don't know that Morticia's ever worn a crown, but she is something of a queen. So that's the idea behind it. But I will absolutely link you a tutorial for the Chaos crown a little bit later on. I want to take you back down to the board for a tick whilst we're waiting for people to join and just show you all of the different tags that are left over, and the box itself is absolutely stunning. I'm not going to spoil it if you haven't received it already. It's so much fun, really beautiful. So you've got lots of different pieces and they're all named so beautifully. I just like the whole aesthetic of it. I mean, it's right up my street. Hi to Sue from Ohio. Hi to Prudence from North Carolina. Good evening to Virginia. Whereabouts are you, my darling? Are you a Ginny or are you a Virginia? Thank you very much for your kind comments on the crown. I just thought I'd wear something a little bit different. This is one I made last year, I think, but I will link a tutorial for you a little bit later on. I hope you've all had a beautiful day so far. Here we go. Let's see my silly little face again. Hello. My software's a bit tricky tonight, so many apologies for that. It was having a bit of radio silence for a moment there. Can you hear me okay? Rosalind is in from Southern California. Hello to you. I hope you've had a beautiful day so far. Honestly, the Morticia's Garden box is so beautiful. There's a strand in there called Spells and Hexes, which is so gorgeous. I'm sure that you're going to be delighted. Ohio, USA, New York, depends on who's calling. I like Ginny. All of my friends who are called Virginia, and I have 3 of them, all go by Ginny. It's a lovely name. Hi from Nikki in Virginia. Hello to you, my darling. I hope you're all having an absolutely fabulous day. So for today, there's a couple of pieces that I want to share with you. I want to show you how to make a halo effect around a huge focal that you get in this box. It's so exciting. It's really beautiful. And again, I can't stress enough how much up my street this box is. It's absolutely perfect. In addition to that, I'm going to show you at least one pair of earrings using wire work. If we've got time at the end of today's show, I've got a little earring, and now it's not wire work, it's simple bead threading, but it might be using the components in a slightly different way than perhaps you'd used them before, so I wanted to share that with you. It's literally a 2-minute make. So tell me what you've been up to today. Have you been out and about? Is it hot and sunny where you are? Are you having a good time? Don't know who we've got with us this evening so far, but it's my absolute pleasure to be with you, and thank you so much for giving me your company today. It means the world. I'm going to just quickly show you, whilst I clear the board of all of those beautiful tags telling you what we've got in the monthly bead box. I'm just going to clear those out of the way. And I want to show you the focal bead. Absolutely. Hello there. Danielle is in the house. Hello, my darling. How are you? I hope you've had a good day too. Rosanna is in. Hello. Jem from Montana. Hello, darling. How are you? My fellow circlet buddy. This one is from last year. I almost wore one from about 4 years ago, but it's got a bit squished in storage, so I didn't do very well there. I absolutely love the box, says Connie. My first one, and yes, I was squealing with delight when I opened it. 100%. I was doing the exact same thing right there with you. Robin is in from Tempe, Arizona. You see, I have learnt how to pronounce one name now, so go me. It's absolutely fabulous to be with you. I'm just going to drop you down to the board for a second because I want to show you this piece. This is one of the focals that comes in this week's or this month's MMB, and I am absolutely in love. Black is a colour that I tend to wear quite a lot. Black's a colour that I like to see in jewellery, but the detail on this is absolutely magnificent. Now, it's drilled all the way through across the back, so you can absolutely bead strand, pop the beads in whatever order you fancy, and in the box there are so many to choose from. You could do basically whatever you wanted. But if you wanted to add a little bit of drama to that, I'm going to show you a way that we can halo around that. Hi y'all, says Roberta. Love the crown, Jem. Thank you very much. Glad to have your company. Cynthia is in from Houston. Hello, Queen Jem. I'll take it, but I'm a duchess at most, my darling. There's no royalty in my blood, I'm afraid. I don't know what I'd do if there was, to be perfectly honest. Let's have another look at this rose, because it's so beautiful. So beautiful. And that's one of the pieces that we're going to be working with. In fact, that's the piece that we're going to start working with at the top right about now. So I'm working with 2 gauges of wire today. I've gone for an 18 gauge. It's just very standard round wire in an 18 gauge, and I've chosen silver plated copper for tonight's show, or today's show as the case might be. You can either use the German style or the artistic. It makes no difference whatsoever. They both will behave perfectly for this tutorial. So I'm going to pop you back down there and we'll have a look at the materials that we're going to use to start off on this design. Joanne's in from New York. Sandra is in, I'm going to say Capitola. Hello, Sarah, darling. How are you? How can I receive the Morticia Mystery Bead Box? I am going to pass you over to our gorgeous Danielle and Sarah to explain the bead box to you. Because that's their department. I twiddle bits of wire around and cut stuff and hammer stuff sometimes. So, yes. To begin with, I'm working with a 15-inch section. As I say, it's just round wire, very easily available for everyone. So I've got a 15-inch section of your 18-gauge wire, silver-plated round in this instance. There we go. Sarah is in there to show you how you can grab your own MMB for September. There's a couple still available. So what I want to do is show you a way that you can surround this rose in a halo and add even more drama. Not that it's not dramatic as it is, and you could very simply pop some beads onto this piece and allow it to sit on a necklace design, or even on a circlet if, like Rosanna and myself, you're obsessed with headpieces. So there's that as an option. But for today, I wanted to show you a haloing effect. Now there's a couple of twists and turns at the beginning, but pretty soon it's going to get to be quite obvious how that's going to work. So I just want to make sure that this is up in the corner so that you can see what we're working with. The first thing that we should always do with our wire is give it a bit of a smooth and a warm. So again, 15 inches and it's 18 gauge round, and I'm just going to smooth that between thumb and forefinger, maybe 3 or 4 times, and now it's warm and friendly and flexible. So what I want to do to begin with is take a short length on the end like so. This is around about maybe 3.5 to 4 inches, and what I'm going to do is put a bit of an angled bend like so, not a huge amount, it's about 45 degrees. Allow a small section, probably about 1/4 of an inch, and we're just going to put a little bit of a Z shape in there to begin with. What I want to do now is to create the wrapped loop up at the top. Now in my staged section I've done quite a large wrapped loop, but if you're going to add this onto a threaded bead design, as I'm going to do in a couple of minutes hopefully, just to show you what it can look like if you add it on, you can make a really tiny loop, but I'll show you both of those pieces side by side. So for this one I'm going to make a tiny loop. I'm going to bring in my staged bail making pliers. What I need to do is put a small bend coming forwards to begin with, like so. Hopefully that's all still in shot for you. And we're just going to make a little circular form at the top and then wrap around this neck section. This bend, the reason I've added it, if I just slide the bead on to show you, you can see that that's going to sit against that small bend. So when you're sizing up that short length of wire that sits on that kind of Z shape, that's the kind of size we're looking for. We just want that to sit in nicely and be supported by the design. So just pop that back over to the corner, and I'm going to pop in with my, you can use round nose pliers honestly if you're going to make a small loop, but if you want a larger loop then these are absolutely invaluable, my Beadalon 6-step bail making pliers. So I think for this section I'm going to use the second size, and I'm just going to wrap around. Now to show you on camera it's slightly easier to move them thusly, but what we're looking to get is just a little round section at the top there. I'll pop those back out of the way now, and I want to wrap the long tail of wire around this neck section. Now the reason that we're doing that is twofold. One, we want a really sturdy piece to support the weight. Now for me it's going to be easier to actually twist the loop around if you can, and you're not doing this in front of a camera. Actually, I'm just going to pop you back up to the other camera for a tick, and I'll show you how I would do that normally without the camera being right on top of the work. So what I would do is I would hold the loop inside the pliers and support it, and then I would take that tail all the way around the neck that we have created. So hopefully you can see that okay. Tightening those coils up as we go. So if they get away from you, you can just give that a bit of a scooch. When you don't have a camera over the top, it's slightly easier. And I'm sure my fellow designers here, you can understand how that makes things just a little bit more tricky. So if I turn that sideways, we're just going to run that tail of wire, and this is the long tail, all the way around. I'm going to have that coming off at 90 degrees to the loop. I'm going to switch you back to the other camera now. Here we go. So we've created ourselves that little Z shape at the top here, onto which that rose will fit later on. So if I just slide the rose back into position, you'll get an idea of what we're looking to create. So what I want to do now is to create a lovely smooth round form all the way around where the rose will sit. Now the easiest way to ensure that you don't make it too small is to leave the rose in position. Now that will spin for the moment, and what I'm going to do is add some heat and warmth, as I always do, to the wire to just draw that around. Now this is the front because the Z bend is coming forwards. I'm just going to check to see if you have any questions at the moment. Yes, this direction you aren't smacking the camera with the wire. Rosanna gets me. Absolutely, my darling. This is the absolute truth. So what I want to do is to take the wire over the surface of the upright through which that bead will sit. So if you warm the wire, it's going to want to please you. It is going to want to turn a nice circular form. So you can just add a little bit more warmth if you need to. Sorry about the noise of the bead on the table. Add a little bit more warmth and draw that all the way around. Now once I'm sure that I've created the right kind of size for my bead, and I want that to encircle, we've gone back to that word again, but we do want that to be quite nice and round. We don't want it to be smaller than the rose, although you can, if you want to, just sit that slightly behind if you prefer. But for me, I want to make a halo effect for this rose. I want to make this rose shine even more than it already does. So what I need to do now is take the tail of wire that's come across the top of the neck and double wrap it around the top section here. So in order for me to do that safely, I'm going to take the bead off the wire. Now at this stage, if you pinch very firmly with your non-dominant hand, you can take a second to ensure that that is as round as you want it to be. You could, in theory, bend the rear wire away slightly and use a round form to create that if you prefer, but for me, I don't want to lose the size. So the first thing I'm going to do is take the tail of the wire all the way around the neck section. Now I know that that's the right size. If I pop the bead over the top, I know the rose is going to sit inside the halo we're creating. So if I pop that back over to the side, what we would then need to do is take a moment to get this circular frame actually circular. So obviously when you're making that in underneath a camera that's just a couple of inches above, it's a little bit more tricky. You can take more time to get that a little bit more perfect. When you're happy with that circular form, we're going to take that tail all the way around and double wrap on the neck section. Now whilst this is a comfortable weight, it's not made out of pyrite or lead. It's not so heavy that it will be uncomfortable. It does pay to have a double wrapped neck on your pendant design. So I'm taking that tail all the way around and I'm going to take it to the back. So we've got that little loop, the little bend in the wire that is coming backwards from the design. So this is the front of the design. Over on the back, what I'm going to do is trim away that little excess of wire, like so. Where are we going to put it? In the scrap pot, Jem. And then I'm going to take that tiny little end section and squish it flat. So what you should have is something that looks a little bit like this, which right now looks crazy and weird, and why would I even do that? So if I just drop in my spare, this is one that I prepared earlier, and if you're being a little bit neat, that's where you end up with. So I'm just going to put this one out of the way for now. Your alternative to cutting the wire at the back is to leave a short tail which you can make into a coil. So instead of trimming that away on the back, I'm going to show you an alternative design, which is to cut about 2 inches from the end. Let's find those round nose pliers, which are on the wrong side of the desk, of course, and I'm going to make a coil for you just to sit up and over the neck. Now you've got two options there to personalise it, to make sure that you're happy with how that sits. Starting that coil super slowly. Small manoeuvres will help you get control of your coils and make neater coils. Now you might see that I'm doing this at 90 degrees to the design when we'll want to flip it so that it sits flat. This enables me to control the coil slightly better. So I'm going to do very small movements. It's somewhere between 1/8 and 1/4 of a turn at a time. And I've seen people make them a lot faster and still be neat, but for me I would rather take the time and get that looking really, really good. So I'm going to sit the coil over the top of the double neck that we've just wrapped, and I'm going to push that loop, or that coil rather, down over the surface, and you can sit so that that sits neatly into position. So this is the first section of our halo. Dee says, joined late, got my first MMBB this month. So excited to see the ideas of how to use some of these things. Absolutely. It's an amazing box. I was absolutely stoked to open it, I promise you. So at this stage, you're probably wondering what on earth it is I've made. Is it a signpost? What are we going to do with it? Well, I'm going to show you now how you can add the halo effect and pop some beads onto that circular form around the outside. Now, obviously, from the MMB, you can use any beads that you want, but I particularly like how small faceted beads look in a halo design. So I'm going to show you one of those and then we'll move on to the next section. So here we are, we've got our piece ready to rock and roll. We've added a coil on the front of this one. What I need to do is find some of my 26 gauge. Now you could in theory use 24 gauge if you prefer. As long as it goes through the beads, that's absolutely fine. For people who are relatively new to wire work, I kind of suggest using the 26. This is artistic gauge, German would work just as well. Now, for a complete circuit of this size, I would say probably 18 inches of wire is necessary. But because I'm only going to demonstrate a short section of the technique, I don't want to waste wire. I think you know me by now, I'm quite thrifty. So that little end section we're going to discard because it's a little bit misshapen. So what I want to do is leave my rose bead out of the equation for the moment, and I want to wind on my finer gauge wire to my circular form at least 5 times, and this is because we'll be pulling that ever so slightly in a little while. So I've laid my finer gauge wire over the top surface, and I'm going to pull that little tail, it's around about 1 inch of tail over the top, and I'm going to wrap that around at least 5 times. For me, I think probably what I'm going to do, because I've got the coil and I can hide things if it's not 100% the same on both sides, I'm just going to use up all of that wire. Tighten those coils together, make sure there are no sticky outy bits left in the way. So once I've tightened that coil up, I'm going to flip it over so that the finer gauge wire is radiating out from that circular form, and I'm going to scooch that all the way up to what is the top of the design. I appreciate it's upside down right now, but it is the top of the design. Now you can see here I used a much larger loop at the top, which means this can be worn as an independent pendant. Do you see what I did there? That wasn't even on purpose. So I'm going to grab myself a bead, any bead. They're not where I left them, which is always good fun. It's a shared workshop space. So I'm just going to allow one of those to scooch out. Well, they all actually came out then, which is fairly classic for what happens with me. So I've got my wire cast on, if you like. Dee says I'm a subscriber as of this month. I'm really pleased for you, sweetheart. So I've got probably at least sort of 12 to 15, maybe even 18 inches of the finer gauge wire. It's very firmly hooked onto that circular form, and I'm going to add one of these absolutely stunning faceted beads onto the end of that wire. I'm only going to do this once because it's obviously quite painful to see me putting beads on things. Not the greatest skill in the world. I like bending wire. So the finer gauge wire is coming underneath that circular form. What I'm going to do is to support that bead in position really carefully. I'm not putting any pressure on the bead other than holding it in position. I'm squashing from above and below to hold it so that it sits still. I'm going to then take the tail of the wire over the top of that circular form and draw that around this little section which forms the circumference around the outside. I'm going to wrap that 5 times probably before I add in my next bead. So that's 1 and 2, 3, 4 and 5. Now the number of coils in between the beads will design or decide for you how far apart your beads fit. If you've got tons of a particular bead or you want to use different beads all the way around, then you can really go as few or as many as you like. So I'm just going to show you one more time. And then I'm going to show you a piece that I've partly completed earlier on. So I'm adding the next bead in. The finer gauge wire is still underneath the circular section. Zip line in with that finer bead. Again, I'm going to support the bead, but I'm not putting any pressure on it against the wire. I'm supporting it, not crushing it. Take the tail of the wire over the top of the circumference wire and then wrap 5 times, and on you go until you have filled as much or as little of the halo as you like. So I'm just going to drop a piece in that I was working on yesterday. If I was to use all of the small blue and the beautiful shiny silver crinkly disc beads in this month's bead box, this was the colourway that I chose, then I would be able to have a mirror on the far side. But I just wanted to show you what that looked like all the way around. So what I'm going to do for now is just pull this wire over to one side, because I'll finish this and put photos up later for you. What we need to do now is add our rose bead into position. So I don't think it really matters which of the holes you use. You just need to be sure that you're happy with the aesthetics of it all. And you will do this at a point in time when you've finished adding all of your halo beads on. So what I'm going to do is just sit that so that those disc beads sit slightly under the petals. If you've gone for all small beads and you haven't used the disc beads at all, that's absolutely fine. What we're going to do next, what I might do is just swap that long tail of wire out of the way for the second. This tail of wire that we had at the bottom coming out the base of the bead, that's going to now tie on to the circumference, the round form that we created. Just need to make sure that my rose bead sits neatly inside the halo form, and then you can allow it to twist if you wish to. What we're going to do is very, very simply loop it around the 6 o'clock position on the halo pendant. So to do this, I'm going to trim away probably to about 1/4 of an inch in the scrap pot with that, and then I'm going to draw that small section of wire up and over the circular form. So 1/4 of an inch is enough to just bring that round safely. I'm just going to turn that over on its side and close that section up. Just concentrating for a moment so that I don't squash anything I don't need to be squashing, and then you can flip that bead back over. And then you've got a bead in your design which will actually spin if you want it to. If you make the halo slightly smaller, then you can have that sitting down. As I said, I will add the other beads from the box onto this and complete it later on. Coming back up to my funny face, what I want to show you now is a collection of the beads that I've used from, I think, probably every single one of the different collections in this month's MMB, and I've put them all onto a strand, and I just want to show you what this pendant design will look like if I add it onto the design. And I'll be finishing that later on because I've got to unstrand it so that I can add my design into position. But I just want to show you some of the gorgeous beads. So if I bring them in and show you what will essentially be the necklace part of the design, that is what the finished necklace is going to look like. And I've done this very, very symmetrically. Now, obviously, you don't have to be symmetrical if you don't want to. What I've done is I've temporarily strung it on the beautiful purple thread that you also get in the MMB this month. I've had a couple of clasps in my stash, so I've chosen to use those because they were near. And what I've done, rather than finishing both sides, I've left it so that I can move the wires around. When I'm creating the loop of this design, I can do that quite large so it works as an independent pendant, or I can make that little loop or bail really, really small. If I make it super small, it will sit really nicely between the two kind of sorcery, spacery beads that I've chosen, and it will sit and look like that. And I think once I've finished the project, photos tomorrow at the latest, I think that's going to look really beautiful all together. But I wanted to show you the haloing technique, which you can use on any of the beautiful big beads. You can actually do it on any size bead, to be perfectly honest. So that's what it's going to look like in the end. If I just scooch these all down, I think it's going to look really pretty with the haloed bead and then all of those gorgeous colourways. So if we pop up, back up with me for a second, that's the first of our tutorials for tonight. I want to show you a wirework earring now. Now I've made one, and then we'll make the second one together. Whenever I make wirework earrings at home for sale or even for myself, what I tend to do is make them side by side, just making one bend in the wire at a time, and in that way I can get a real good sense of symmetry to them. Some people like to have their earrings both both matched in one direction, and some people like to have them symmetrically opposite. So you can play around with that design as you make earrings, but if you do them side by side, start with 2 exactly the same length pieces of wire, thread each bead on, make each turn. I think it really does up your game when it comes to making to sell or making to gift, and you want people to think, wow, that's amazing. So we're going to just move the project that we've just created together out of the way. And as I said, I will finish the project. I'll add it all to a finished section, and I'll pop a photo up in the thread for this video, for this live, so you can see the bead order and you can just gasp in amazement at the beautiful beads that we're looking at. I'm going to grab in the first earring now, so you can take a look at that and tell me if the background is okay to be making on. I do have a white background to hand if we need one of those. Thank you so much, Robin. That's really, really kind of you. Thank you very much for your kind words. So I'm going to be working with this absolutely stunning... Now, it looks to me like a padparadscha, like a lotus blossom flower. I could be wrong. You can tell me if I am wrong. But we're going to be working with one of these fans. Looks like a fan to me. One of these absolutely gorgeous S spacers. And I imagine this is a pyrite faceted oversized rondelle. I could be wrong. I'm sure I will be corrected if I am. That's what we're going to make up next. Now we'll be working again with the 18 gauge silver plated round wire. Do you want me to switch to the white background? I'm just going to show you what that looks like. If I pop that under for a second. If you prefer it, it's really tricky with silver coloured wire as to what looks best. So have a gander and tell me what you think, what you'd prefer, whether you want the wood of my desk or whether you want the white background. Because the shadows can be a bit confusing sometimes. So which do you prefer? And then we'll crack on and make the earring together. Thank you very much, Connie. That's very kind of you. Do we want the white background or wood? White or wood? White is better. Okay, we will stick with the white for now. So the component parts, I have here approximately 12 inches of 18 gauge wire. Now, that is much longer than we need, but we will always use those offcuts, and I would much rather have more than too little. So we've got 2 votes for white and 1 for wood, 3 votes for white. I'm sorry, my darling. It's white for the 4 votes for white, 2 votes for wood. Do you know what? I think we're going to stick with the white, and hopefully the majority rule will still work okay. You can just about see that silver on both of the surfaces, but I think you'll be able to see the components better on the white. So apologies if you preferred the wood, but this is where we're going to go. Roberta says, that's a pretty earring, work duty's called and I had to pop off for a few. Well, I hope you're okay, sweetheart, and I hope your day is progressing. These are the components we'll be using. The fan section. We're going to use the, I imagine, faceted pyrite type rondelle and one of these amazing S spacers or filigree spacers if you prefer. Attention to detail on them is magnificent. So I just need to make sure that when I line this earring up in the corner, you'll still be able to see it. If I pop that up like so, you should be able to see that okay. So these are the sections that we're going to work with, and in this order. And I've had a pair of black earring findings in my stash since the dawn of time, so I've managed to find a use for them now. I'm going to pop these 2 out of the way for a second, and what I'm going to do is warm that wire because it means that it's fluid and much more useful and receptive to the work that you want to do with it. So for this, what I'm going to do is initially I'm going to go in through the first loop and allow that to just move all the way through. I'm not going to worry about the second loop at this time. Then I'm going to add in my filigree spacer bead and allow that to sit down. And then I'm going to retract the wire and then line it up and push that through. So I want this to sit down about halfway along all of that wire, and that means we've got enough wire to play around with to do wrapped loops up at the top here, and also to add this little section of wire that swooshes around the side of the bead. Hello to Florida. So the first thing we're going to do is put a right angle bend on one side of the design. So again, this is in the centre of about 12 inches of wire. What I'm going to do is push that ever so slightly to the left and get a really firm right angle bend to begin with. And then I can slide that back in and flip the design over. I'm just making it easier for myself because I'm right dominant. I can then just use my hand to push that over to one side and just make sure that my angles are all correct. So when I say I make earrings in stages, this is what I mean. I would bend the wire like so, and I'd get both of them into the same position, and in that way I can check. I see that I need to just put a little bit more angularity on that side of the wire. Line them up. Yes, I'm happy. Let's move on to the next stage. So ensuring that there's not terribly much movement, we're going to put a second angle in. Now these are really beautiful fans. They're not weak and wishy-washy. Sometimes when you buy components from other suppliers, what you will get is a punching. And a punching is a very, very thin sheet of metal which is pressed from above and below to create almost a thin shell of a shape. This is not a thin shell of a shape. I don't know what the manufacturing technique is, but it's lovely and sturdy, so I've no fear that when I put this second bend in, I don't think anything awful is going to happen to my loop. It's really beautifully made. So I've got the second bend in, and I just need to push that over so that they meet in the centre above the filigree spacer bead. So again, I would be at pains to make sure that those angles are correct, and I think I need to bring that in just a little bit further on both sides so that they sit just so. And what we're going to do here, the wire should be the same length on either side because we centralised our length of that 18 gauge to begin with. I'm going to come from underneath with my bent chain nose pliers and sit that just at the point where those two wires cross over. What I want to do is grip, for me the one at the back is going from right to left, and I'm going to turn that into an upright bend. You can take a little bit longer than I am to make sure that's a really nice neat bend. I'm going to flip that round on its side. The next thing that I want to do is wrap twice around the neck section of my earring. Now to begin with, to make sure that we get a really good angle on this, if I flip it in the opposite direction, I'm now going to go over the top and hold the wire on the opposite side. I'm going to make that do a 90-degree angle. So we've got the one wire coming up from right to left, stopping in the centre and going up to 12 o'clock. The wire that came out on the other side, travelling from left to right, where it meets that first angle, we've turned it right, so it's coming over to 3 o'clock on the clock face. Now I'm going to push this around again. Sorry about the clong on the camera there. I'm going to push this around so it's easier for me to hold. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pinch with my pliers on the upper wire, which is this one, and I'm going to turn that so that there's a bend. Sorry about that. The bend goes all the way around the neck wire whilst I'm supporting it. Now the reason for doing that is when you start coiling around the neck with the wire that was coming out at a straight line, it tends to pull. And if you don't put this bend in first, what you'll end up with is this side being much, much shorter, and then you lose your sense of symmetry and centralisation. So I'm going to give that a very, very gentle touch to squeeze that down into position like so. I'm then going to pinch it really quite firmly and draw the tail over the top like so. And we're going to go for a second time around the back and pull that over to the side. Now, because we have made a little bit of stress on the design here, what we're going to do is make sure that that's really, really neat and tidy before we apply a little bit more warmth. Now what I would do here is make sure that both of these things are the same kind of number of wraps and that they look how I want them to look. So if I flip this over, I think we need another loop going around, underneath and off in the left direction. And in that way I can get these to be opposite. They will be symmetrical by nature of a mirror image. So if I just hold on to those two sections of wire that come out from the fan shaped bead, not where it crosses over, but hold on to those two sections and just support them whilst I draw that tail all the way around. And if I lay the two earrings side by side, hopefully you can see what it is I'm looking to achieve. We've got similar angles, we've got a similar distance between the bead and the nexus where things join all together. And on this side, on the earring that I've already made, the wires come out and underneath, and it's going to scooch around the right hand side of the bead that we're about to add on. So what I want is for the wire to come away and on the left on this side, so that we can create that mirror image if you want that. Doesn't matter if you make two the same, they'll be on opposite sides of the head anyway, unless you wear them on the same side, and then you can do whatever you want. So I'm going to pop on the, I think, pyrite spacer all the way down. It's a faceted rondelle, it is beautiful. I'm just going to sit that in position. What I want to do now is just make sure that I can re-warm the wire that's coming out at the side. If you don't re-warm it, it won't be smooth and fluid when you bring that swoosh around the edge of the bead. Now, pyrite's really quite strong, so I'm going to allow a little bit of pressure on the bead at this time. If this was a glass spacer that you've chosen to use, you will need to proceed with a little more caution. So heat into the wire, start that swooshing shape, draw the bead down, and then bring that tail of wire over the top. So it's equal and opposite in symmetry with the other design. So I'm now going to wrap twice around the upright and trim away the excess and make a little wrapped loop at the top before we finish off our earring project. I'm just going to pop this out of the way so it doesn't go splooting onto the floor, which is normally what happens. Am I right, Rosanna? Yes, I think so. So again, a little bit of heat. After you've made any bend in wire, the effects travel along the wire. It work hardens just a little bit further than where you actually made the bend happen. So I'm going to pull that tail all the way around, and as I say, pyrite's a nice and strong material. I imagine it's pyrite. You will need to proceed a little bit more cautiously if you're working with a glass bead. So I've made two small wraps around the upright. Very much so, yes indeed, Rosanna. And what I'm going to do now is flip this over to look at the back of the design, and I'm going to trim away my excess. All of these offcuts are large enough to make into components. I will turn that into an S hook or a J hook to make my own findings for project designs which are all made out of wire. So nothing is ever wasted, but it is very sad if you trim your wire too short and you then can't finish a project. What you will have to do if that happens to you is say, well, it was worth the experience and I learnt something when I was doing it. Jem, you explained things so beautifully. That's really kind of you and I appreciate your feedback. Thank you so much. What we need to do up at the top here to get that sense of symmetry is estimate the distance between where the swoosh of wire comes and where you're going to put your wrapped loop. Now my earring findings have the loop on the bottom in the same orientation as the ear wire itself, so I will want to have a sideways loop for a forwards to backwards earring finding. If that is problematic for you, you can simply add a jump ring to fix things. As long as you do the same thing on both sides, it doesn't really matter. So what I'm going to do is create a sideways wrapped loop up at the top in approximately the same place as I have on the first earring. So if I just drop those side by side for a moment, that might be slightly shorter, but I'm not going to overly stress about it. You can take a little bit more time to ensure that those are the same length. I'm going to pop this one out of the way now so I don't bodge it, and I'm going to do you one more wrapped loop. Now, one of the things that I like to do when I'm wrapping two pieces of wire to meet together is to try and get the ends of the wire together. In that way, you don't get any gasping great gaps in the back of your design. Rosanna says, I had to cut something apart this morning as I put something backwards. It is heartbreaking, but we learn. We learn from every time we put something in the bin. So what you can see here is the wire has come around over the top and it stops just there. So what I want to do is try and meet that wire. Now this, after 7 years of working with wire, I still have to think twice about every single time. So what I'm going to do is make my loop first, and if I have to, I can switch the side that the wire sits on. So let's have a look. It would need to come underneath, I think. So we draw that underneath. Make sure that your loops are approximately the same size as your first earring. That looks good. And what we're going to do is imagine the line traced by our tail of wire. So it's going to go round in this direction. It's going to come across here, over the front, round the back. And it should, when we cut it, meet the other cut section of wire. And it's things like this that will set you apart from people that haven't taken the time to think about it. So take an extra second, and I promise you, 7 years of wire work, I still have to draw the little imaginary line as I move around. So we've got our coils from above, coils from below. They're going to meet on the same cut. So if I just trim that away, and again, we've got far too much wire, but that's so much better than not having enough. Now you've got two ends that are going to meet. If you just give them a bit of a squish and a squeeze, they'll sit down really quite neatly. You can just tidy those loops up a little bit. You've obviously got a little bit more time. You don't want to sit and watch me doing that endlessly. But when you take that extra time to think about your loops meeting up, if you're bringing cut wire from the top and cut wire from the bottom, it's a really smart place for them to meet. There's no ends of wire further down. If you get them to sit neatly together, you can absolutely, it's just winning. It's just winning. And honestly, every single time I have to do the same little imaginary loop with my fingers to just think, well, will it go that way? Will it go that way? And it's just a case of, does the wire go over the top or does it go underneath? So I'm just going to open my earring finding like so. You open them like a jump ring if you've never used one before. We're going to pop that into position, close that back up neatly, hopefully neatly. And then with any luck, what we've got is a pair of earrings. I've put it on backwards like an absolute winner. Attention to detail, she says, and then she puts it on backwards. Awesome. So you've got your two pairs of earrings there, and they are equal and opposite. Let's pop back up to my face for a second. My mouse has turned off, which is always good. So I hope that you've enjoyed the two wire work designs for this evening. And if you have any questions about any of that, do let me know. As I mentioned earlier, let me just pick up the beaded necklace. All of these beads come in this month's bead box. They're all from different collections, and I've stranded them. I've done one end, but I've only temp strung the other end, and there's a space down here, which is where I'm going to add on the halo rose design that we started at the beginning of the show. And what I'll do, once I finish that, I'll pop a photo of it up in the comments below in this is it a group or is it an event? I can't remember how it's been done now. But you'll find a finished image so you can see all the gorgeous beads that we've used alongside the halo rose design. I do want to share with you, now it's not technically wire work, but I do want to share with you one last design of the evening. So we finished our matched earrings. This is what I want to show you. It's super simple, super easy. It's a 2-minute make. But I've seen a lot of people asking, how do I use the crown? I don't want to use it as a bead cap. It's far too spectacular. So here is a way that you can use it where it's something quite special. So these are so cool. 100% would love a strand of just those. So what I'm going to do is take the crown and I'm going to invert it, put it on upside down. And it's going to sit on this gorgeous tapered point, and I'm not sure what the material is, but I'm in love with it. I love how the crown sits over the top of that shape. Really, really beautiful. And then I've got a short length of the beading thread, beading wire that comes in this month's MMB. I'm just going to slide that down. This is only a couple of inches. It's maybe about 6 inches of the thread, which again is far more than I need. Now the reason I use far more than I need is to make my life easier up at the top here. So I've got an odd assortment of crimps and crimp beads. I'm running super low, so they're all really funny colours. So once I've sat the design down at the bottom, I'm going to add one of these. I'm going to call it a pumpkin spacer because that's what it looks like. It could be a vase from a fairy tale. Not entirely sure. You can obviously decide what you want each of those things to be. And then we've got one of these, I want to say rope spacers. I don't know how they're described. Slide that down. A second pumpkin or vase or column. I should probably learn the names of these things. That would make a lot of sense, wouldn't it? And I'm just putting all of those over the double strand of the beautiful coloured beading thread, which I've burnt through already. It's amazing. Now once I've got that into position, what I can do is add on my earring finding after the crimp. So I know everybody gets the nerves about doing crimps, so we'll see how badly I manage to squash it flat. Now there are two schools of thought when it comes to squashing your crimp. I prefer tube crimps over round crimps. It's horses for courses. You choose whichever one you want. We like your artistic interpretative names of the beads. Good. Melon is also good, but I like pumpkins. I actually do like pumpkins. So I've added on my earring finding. Now there's every possibility that that might fall off because I've had it in stock forever and it's been a bit bent. So I'm going to take the two tails of wire back through my tube crimp. Now that's where having the extra beading thread will make life slightly easier. Now it's a bit tight getting 4 passes through because these are the super fine lightweight ones and it's not right in front of my nose, which is where it needs to be. So what I might do is take one through and you'll get the picture. That needs to go back through, take the second one through, and then we can tidy that up in just a second. I swear my optician says I don't need up close glasses, but I would argue the point on that one. So I'm just going to allow that to slide into position. Obviously I've just completely massacred that and pulled it back out instead of going in the correct direction. There we go, we're getting there. We are getting it done, folks. Pull that all the way through. Now you can if you want to. My earring finding has just fallen off as I thought it might. So what we're going to do is to create a loop up at the top there. Draw that all the way down. It's a 2-minute make if you can actually get your crimp on. And to draw those down so that they sit really neatly. If you need to, you can hold that into position on your round nose pliers while you get that pulled up nice and tight. And again, you will want to ensure that that sits in the same length as your first earring so that they become a matched pair. And once you've got that nice and tight, you can squash your crimp bead flat. So I'm just going to draw the crimp up slightly and crush it. Now you can use a 2-step crimp pliers if you prefer. My interpretation of tube crimp is what I would do is I would squash that flat and I will bend the excess up and away that I want to cut off, and it makes it just a little bit easier to get in there and trim away those 2 excess pieces before I add my crimp cover into position, which will be much easier if we put the earring finding on. Should be a 2-minute make. If your eyeballs work, it will be slightly easier for you. So pop that into position. We're going to close that up. You could of course use wire guardians if you have them. And then once that's in position, we're going to go for mixed metals. So we've got some bronze colours going on here, almost a hematite tone, silver or an antique silver. Slide that crimp bead cover over the top. And what I'm going to do is push everything away behind that and just close that up. Now you can again use your crimping pliers, but this is how I crimp and it hasn't let me down yet. Although, of course, you know, on air a couple of years ago, it probably did. So that is your 2-minute make. You're not using up a lot of beads for this one. And just allow that to sit down slightly. But I do love how they look. So if we pop back up to my face. Hello! I've had loads of fun with this box. And again, the excitement that I felt unwrapping it. It's a beautiful box. It's so far up my street, it's just not true. I almost went for the full corset and wiggle dress, but honestly, you wouldn't have liked that. Put on a bit of weight lately, so wouldn't look too fantastic. I hope you've had as much fun as I have. I will finish off the beaded halo necklace and I'll put up photos for you. I'll also add photos of the finished earrings as well. And if you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to ask at any time. I look forward to seeing you again very, very soon. Rosanna says, close, it's a melon. Love your pieces today. Thank you so much, my darlings. It's been my absolute pleasure to be with you. Clear instruction. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate that. Like I say, any questions, just pop a comment in below and I will see if I can help you just as soon as I can get back on the computer. I have to take a ticket and wait in this household because everybody wants it. You take care and I look forward to seeing you again very, very soon. I'll see you, hopefully, next Thursday. Bye!